Welcome to By Seat and By Saddle, seeing North America by car and by motorcycle. After our retirement in 2011, my wife Sue and I made a number of road trips around North America, recording what we did and taking pictures of what we saw. Thinking our experiences might be useful to others planning similar road trips, we decided to preserve and share our travel diaries. This is part 3 of a 4-part travel diary we made of a trip south to Florida and down to Key West in March of 2012. The trip included a detour west along the Florida Panhandle and the Gulf Coast to New Orleans. We have again repeated the list of the trip highlights in each part to make it easier to choose which part to see or to go back to if there is something you want to look at again. At the end of part 2, we had just finished seeing New Orleans and were again traveling east along the coast of the Gulf of Mexico towards Florida. So come on and continue this trip with us. We will again take you along with words and photographs. It's always a pleasure to share them with you. Remember, you can stop the video at any time for a closer look at any photograph. We stopped at a pier to see what local fishermen were catching. We found one fishing technique we had never seen before called net casting. The technique doesn't catch marlins, but it sure catches bait fish, which is what it is intended to do. Since we were camped near Bayou La Batre, we had to catch a ferry back to Dauphin Island later that evening. Here, the ferry, named the Fort Morgan, is coming to pick us up, waiting at the Fort Morgan ferry landing. As the ferry pulled away from Fort Morgan, we got a nice view of the defenses that were part of the Mobile Bay battlefield during the Civil War. From the ferry, the late afternoon view over Mobile Bay with its oil derricks and the Mobile Bay Causeway in the distance was memorable. Continuing our trip, we reached Foley, Alabama, where we noticed Lambert's Café, an eating establishment famous for throwing dinner rolls. The dinner rolls were soft, fresh, and delicious. Couldn't have asked for better ones, and so we barely could bring ourselves to throwing them instead of eating them. However, customers were strongly encouraged to start dinner roll fights, and so we did finally throw one or two. As far as we could tell, no one ever buttered them first. Thank goodness. The waiters also threw dinner rolls across the room, sometimes lobbing them, sometimes firing them as hard as they could. Since they wore plastic gloves, if you caught one, you didn't have to worry about eating it. Of course, if another customer threw it, he might have picked it up off the floor. Your call. The lights were mounted inside common canning jars, a nice touch for a restaurant, and a great protection from flying buns. When dinner arrived, it was really good too. We then drove east on the I-10 to where it connects with the I-75 south in Florida. We stopped briefly to visit the Olustee Civil War battlefield in the Osceola National Forest. It is the site of the largest Civil War battle in Florida and was a Confederate victory. Union casualties relative to soldiers engaged was the second highest for the Union in the entire Civil War. This plaque, though almost impossible to read, says the battle took place February 20th, 1864, with Federal losses of 2,000 men and Confederate losses fewer than half that number. We were given to understand that controlled fires are periodically set in the battlefield area to control underbrush growth and the accompanying risk of wildfires. The fires char but do not kill the mature longleaf and slash pines, and new vegetation, often a variety of yucca, sprouts quickly. The enduring risk of wildfires in the battlefield area was demonstrated again by 2 large battlefield fires in June of 2015. A couple of buildings in Olustee looked a bit like they could have been there during the Olustee battle. Who needs gas if you can get hot gizzards and barbecued sandwiches? Lake City's current name is not nearly as glamorous as its former name, Alligator. The I-75 rapidly carried us south, before turning sharply east to cross the Everglades, where it is called the Everglades Parkway. There was little human habitation and few connecting roads on the parkway, and its nickname, Alligator Alley, was not too comforting. So we didn't stop for any pictures and again turned south as soon as the opportunity arose. After some miles, we got onto the famous U.S. Highway 1 at Homestead, Florida. After finishing this stretch of highway, we thought this palm tree we photographed was a pretty good reflection of how we felt. A few miles further, and we were on to Key Largo. It is 33 miles long and half a mile wide and is the largest of the Florida Keys. Key Largo was the filming location of scenes in the classic 1947 Humphrey Bogart movie Key Largo. Key Largo also boasts the famous John Pennekamp Coral Reef State Park, which was the first undersea park in the U.S. It has coral reefs that are home to extensive marine life and is very popular for snorkeling and diving. It also offers glass-bottom boat rides to explore the wildlife of the reef. It was getting late by the time we had eaten and set up camp, but we did take a couple of pictures before bed. We didn't forget the ancient cannons on the beach, which are a signature display at the park. This one is from the English Royal Navy ship Winchester, which while underway from Jamaica sank on a Key Largo reef in 1695. The next day, we decided to get on the John Pennekamp glass-bottom boat and go out to see the reefs. The weather was perfect, and even just looking out over the water made the trip well worthwhile. Of course, when we got to the reefs, we all went inside to look through the windows in the bottom of the boat. The limited light over parts of the reef and the reflections on the glass panes left lots of scope for imagination. However, I don't think any of what we saw were sharks or manta rays. I have included one picture as a sample of what we saw. We then got on our motorcycle to ride down to Key West. However, just before leaving Key Largo, we stopped for a short rest near the water. Rocks near the water's edge had some impressive fossils, and then, looking carefully in the shallow water, we spotted a pair of Atlantic needlefish, about 18 inches long. Needlefish are interesting because they are carnivores, but have no stomachs. Must be why they stay so slim. They generally swim in pairs, as confirmed in the picture, and can swim up to 38 miles per hour. Although they are apparently quite common along the Atlantic coast, we had never seen any before, and so they kept us amused for quite a while. The 113-mile portion of Highway 1 that crosses the Florida Keys is called the Overseas Highway, or US 1. It starts at Highway Marker 0 in Key West and ends 113 miles later on Key Largo. Riding the Overseas Highway from Key Largo to Key West on our motorcycle was not a ride, it was an experience. We simply cruised along the narrow strip of pavement, feeling like we were completely immersed in an unlimited expanse of water and sky. We shared the bright sunshine and ocean air with lots of other motorcyclists. Most of the Keys have great things to see and do. For example, Islamorada is known as the sport fishing capital of the world, and charters are available on a 65-foot Miss Islamorada party fishing boat, shown anchored at Bud and Mary's Marina. This picture at mile 73 shows we are approaching a bridge to a key. It is probably Long Key, which lies between miles 65.5 and 71 on the Overseas Highway, includes the city of Layton. Now, how often does one actually get to race a pleasure boat on a motorcycle? In 3 words, just about never. But we did, and I think we won. Here we have reached the Marathon Islands. There are 13 of them spread over 10 miles that claim to be a boating and sailing paradise. A number of abandoned road and rail bridges and causeways are visible from the Overseas Highway. This picture is thought to show a remaining segment of the old 7-mile bridge, built in 1912 as part of the Florida Keys Oversea Railroad. Severe damage by the Labor Day hurricane of 1935, the third most intense in U.S. history, caused the bridge to be abandoned. The 1935 hurricane killed 400 people. Among the victims were 250 World War I veterans constructing the railroad, who were washed into the ocean by the storm surge. As can be imagined, the tragedy created a huge public outcry. This old bridge is another part of the old 7-mile bridge. Here it crosses Pigeon Key and is open to pedestrians, bicyclists, and anglers. Note the access ramp for recreational use of the bridge. These are some additional sections of bridge near the Pigeon Key exit. The derelict Bahia Honda rail bridge that once connected Bahia Honda Key with Spanish Harbor Key was originally built to carry trains, but after the Labor Day hurricane it was converted to highway use. 2 truss spans were removed as part of the decommissioning in 1972. Finally, we arrived in Key West. It is a place of great historical significance and has an atmosphere of never-ending activity and excitement. We were really looking forward to exploring it on our motorcycle and immediately noticed it was 2-wheel friendly. It was also a place of pleasure boats, beautiful boulevards, and healthy palm trees. Turned a corner and there we were, at mile 0 of the famous US 1 highway. This signpost is featured on a lot of Florida travel brochures. Note that curb parking for a quick picture is a cinch on a motorcycle, impossible in a car. A friendly Key Wester obligingly took the photo of the two of us. Everybody is so nice down there. So we got a photo of actually being at mile 0, a great souvenir for when our traveling days are over. We met this great retired gentleman on a motorcycle trike going north on US 1. We had a great conversation just riding along beside him. We really loved his trike and I wanted a picture of it. He generously obliged, but since we couldn't contact him later to confirm permission to use his face, I just photoshopped in my head. Now I can appreciate both the looks of the trike and what I would look like if it were mine. This fellow was a model of the senior's future we all hope for, enjoying every minute. A good snapshot of the life of a retiree living in Key West. You can explore the sights in Key West by walking, taking a hop-on, hop-off trolley tour, or as we did, getting on the world-famous Conch tour train. In the mid-1800s, Key West was the richest city per capita in the U.S. due to the wreckers, the captains and crews who saved the lives and salvaged the cargoes of ships that foundered on Key West's many reefs. This large sculpture, named The Wreckers, is 18 feet long and 25 feet high and honors their contribution. There were chickens wandering around freely everywhere in Key West. They are famous. Called gypsy chickens, they are the descendants of birds released when cockfighting was outlawed in the U.S. in the late 1970s. We happened to notice this family of Papa Rooster and Mama Hen herding an entire brood of 9 little chicks around the bottom of the Wreckers statue. We walked past Ernest Hemingway's home on Whitehead Street. It is said to be the most popular tourist attraction in Key West. However, we decided to put off touring this most interesting piece of history until our next visit. I can't quite remember where we took this picture, except that it was somewhere on Duval Street, a block over from the Hemingway home. However, the scene caught the ambiance of Key West so well, I have chosen to include it. Also on Duval Street is Mel Fisher's treasure jewelry shop. Mel Fisher became the world's most famous shipwreck treasure hunter when he discovered the Spanish galleon Nuestra Senora de Atasha. It sank in 1622 with $450 million of gold, silver, and emeralds. When we were there, Mel's charming daughter-in-law was in charge of the shop and showed us some actual Spanish pieces of 8 taken from the Atasha. Not far from Mel Fisher's treasure shop is a building dubbed the Little White House. Built in 1890, it was used by Presidents Taft, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Carter, and Clinton. It also played a role in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Touring the Little White House was a great refresher on past presidents. The most popular place to have your picture taken in Key West is the huge marker for the southernmost point of the continental USA. Everybody wants to pose there, but stopping a vehicle in front of it is illegal. To avoid a ticket, Sue stood across the street, camera ready, and I rode past the marker, briefly dropping my feet onto the pavement for the big moment. I am confessing to this now based on the hope that the statute of limitations for this offense has expired. If you look carefully, you will note that the sign on the marker indicates that we are actually in the Conch Republic. On April 23, 1982, the U.S. government placed a roadblock on traffic to and from the Keys to check for drugs and aliens. In protest, Key West staged a mock rebellion and pretended to secede. The details given on the Conch Republic website are hilarious, and now all Florida Keys claim to be in a sovereign state of mind. The Republic hosts an Independence Day festival every year on April 23rd, called the Conch Republic Independence Celebration. It's a big party. So, we have now also reached the end of Part 3. In Part 4, we leave the Conch Republic and begin heading steadily north along the Atlantic coast. We stop to revel in motorcycle culture at Bruce Rossmeyer's Daytona Harley Davidson in Ormond Beach. Later, we explore the favorite scenic motorcycle ride at Daytona Bike Week called the Ormond Scenic Loop. We camp at gorgeous Tomoka State Park and use it as a base to visit special Atlantic seaboard attractions like the Ponce Inlet Lighthouse and the charming city of St. Augustine.